from the Battle Frontier. Here we are back in the second Lanaken mid-season showdown this weekend. And of course, I'm still keeping it cuckoo. My name's Ben Kiriakou. Charlie, are you keeping it merry?
I'm maintaining it merry, Ben. There we go.
Merry.
Yeah. I'm bringing the joy. Ben's bringing the, well, we don't quite know what Ben's bringing. He's a loose cannon, trainers, a loose hydro cannon. Shout out to my boy Squirtle back here. That's right. Well, welcome back, trainers. We're at the Lanaken mid-season showdown. If you missed our segment just then, you missed a treat, I'm afraid. Had the Battle Frontier up on Emerald. So good to play through that again because we had the swiftest possible round 2 with Indeedee Iron Crown just sweeping through the opponent's team. The same cannot be said for this particular matchup, though.
No, I think this matchup that we've got going on, Charel, who we saw yesterday on the stream, Simone, who we also saw yesterday on the stream, two trainers that did give us a little bit of a show, to say the least, coming back both with two different teams. That's one of the things that's so great about these mid-season showdown weekends, that people like Shmon are putting on for us, because you have the opportunity to come back to day 2 with something completely different. And here we are with our two trainers in front of us. Well, you said it, Charlie, it's a slow match that Simone is wanting to be playing with that Dondozo Ting Lu combination. No Tatsugiri in sight.
No, and this is a composition that's been rising up in regulation set F. You have Yawn on the Dondozo to try and cycle through your opponent's Pokemon. Ting Lu, incredibly bulky, and has the Rocky helmet there as well. Of course, that's weakening the special attack of everything on the field. Both Dondozo and Ting Lu are physical attackers. But then you do have a faster mode with Chien Pao Dragonite there. Classic offensive Joe, and then Glimmora and the Gouging Fire. Gouging Fire can boost up its partner's attack with Howl. Glimmora, interestingly here, has the ability Corrosion rather than the Toxic Debris. That means that it's going to be able to poison things that would otherwise be immune to that poison. And it has the Toxic Spikes move, so it can set them up manually on the field instead.
Yeah, don't even need your opponent to attack into you. Instead, just, hey, let's just have the poison right now. And yeah, I don't know if there's any interaction. I don't think there is between Corrosion and Toxic Spikes. That would be quite cool as well.
That'd be interesting.
Like a boosted Toxic Spikes almost, but yeah, I don't think that's quite how that one works. But moving over to Charles' team, it's a little bit more commonplace, the ones we usually see there. We've got the Carmine Raging Bolt, we've got the Choice Scarf Urshifu Rapid Strike, we've got the Substitute Terra Poison, Landorus Incarnate, a Ghost Terror type Incineroar, we've got the standard Rillaboom rocking that Wood Hammer as well as Grassy Glide, and a Sword Stance Ogerpon Half-Flame Mask, which could be really impactful here, where if Simone wants to slow down the pace of the game, going for that Dondozo Ting Lu kind of combination that's picked up a lot of popularity, well, you can just maybe Sword Stance and use that physical attack to best effect.
Right, and I think with Charel's team as well, this is really the first true balanced team that we've seen on stream, I would say, all weekend. And it'll be interesting to see that showcased here as well, especially against Simone's. Also, more standard composition, but not necessarily the balanced team par excellence like Charel is running here. So all sorts of setup options across the board, like the Sword Stance on the Ogerpon, as well as Carmine on the Raging Bolt, and then, of course, Howl coming out from the Gouging Fire. Speaking of which, there it is on the field. Incineroar will be glad to be dropping that Intimidate down on the Gouging Fire, at least. Of course, inner focus on the Dragonite is going to mean it's not going to be taking a drop to its physical attack stat as we switch to our over-the-shoulder view. So physical attackers all round on the field right now, Ben.
They are indeed, and they're going to be doing a lot of work. And of course, Dragonite's inner focus blocking the Intimidate, but also this is not the Assault Vest Dragonite that we're used to seeing. This is not the Choice Band Dragonite that we're used to seeing. Instead, it's carrying the loaded dice and it's got access to Scale Shot. Now that's going to mean that it can hit its Scale Shot either 4 or 5 times. It's a little bit of a coin flip as to whether or not it's 4 or 5. But at the end of the move, it's going to drop its defense and raise its speed. So Howl can come out, increase the power of Dragonite, and Dragonite can go for damage and a speed boosting move. It's kind of like Dragon Dance with a little bit of a bonus.
Right, exactly. Well, U-turn is going to be chipping that Dragonite a little bit. Of course, the inner focus means that that attack is not going to be lowered anytime soon. Landorus is going to be joining the field, of course, threatening really big damage. Onto the Gouging Fire over on Simone's side, Partiente, as Lou likes to call it, ready to go. But this time it's going to be Dragonite chucking out its scales, trying to balance the scales over in Simone's favor. That is loaded dice. It does have the Citrus Berry, the Incineroar. It's not necessarily going to be going down this turn as we switch back to our over-the-shoulder view. So Citrus Berry proving dividends for Incineroar here. Seems like a 5-time hit, though, on that
nice.
Incineroar. So a really good way to try and mitigate that threat as much as you possibly can. Limit the switching options, but there's a Will-O-Wisp. That is certainly one way to mitigate the damage output of the Dragonite.
See, the thing is, Will-O-Wisp, you definitely got to do it in this situation. You've got to make sure that that Dragonite is kept in check. You can't use Will-O-Wisp on the Gouging Fire, and it's howling away. It's going to be increasing its attack as well as Dragonite. So while you've got that Dragonite on the field, it's looking pretty dangerous. Booster Energy activating on the Gouging Fire, raising its speed, will also mean that this Gouging Fire can get another howl up before the Dragonite goes for its second attack. And so if that's enough, as it looks like it would be to knock out the Landorus here, even with 4 hits potentially, then the Gouging Fire is really not going to struggle with the Incineroar that's on the field. It can just keep boosting up its power until it's ready to strike.
Speaking of strike, here comes the Urshifu Rapid Strike as Gouging Fire does go for another howl, trying to mitigate what the burn did to the Dragonite in the first place coming out from the Incineroar. There's another scale shot. You can see how much reduced that damage is now. Looks like it's just going to fall short of the knockout. I don't think 5 is even going to do it, to be honest. It's going to bring it really low.
Each individual one can critical hit, but it's only 4. There's no critical hits in sight here.
No crits and just 4. So defense down once more for this Dragonite. So even something like a Surging Strikes, even though it's a resisted hit, could be doing big damage, but of course Earth Power with the Life Orb, Sheer Force, classic pairing of item and ability for Landorus there is enough to deal with the Gouging Fire. So no more howls coming out for the Dragonite. Its attack stat has a ceiling on it. It cannot soar as high as its little wings would like to.
But it can soar as fast as its little wings would like it to right now. With 2 stages of increased speed, it's probably faster than this Shifu carrying the Choice Scarf. And so Chien-Pao coming in, using the Sword of Ruin ability to lower the defensive capability of Urshifu and Landorus means that the Dragonite is probably the primary threat here. Potentially, it's tough. Like I'm not quite sure of my scale shot calcs here, but again, potentially could be enough to start thinking about threatening this Shifu. Maybe in combination with a Sucker Punch could be enough to pick up the knockout, and especially given that the Shifu's carrying the Choice Scarf. I think both of these trainers have got to be really careful about how they're approaching this. Does the Landorus just protect from the obvious ice move, or and then does Simone take advantage of that? So
that is Landorus going for the protect. This Urshifu does have Ice Spinner as well, so if it can hang on, that could be taking out the Dragonite. Sucker Punch chipping away. What's going to be first? It is going to be Dragonite. Their scale shot. It looks like the Urshifu could be hanging on. It might come down to a 5th scale shot, but even then it's going to be close. That's number 3. Here comes 4. Oh, yeah, it looks like it's going down. Oh, but it hangs on after 4 scale shots. That means that the Ice Spinner could well be taking out the Dragonite this turn. Its defense is solo. Just the Surging Strikes,
3 stages of decreased defense on this Dragonite, and the Sword of Ruin acting against it. Surging Strikes easily enough to pick up the knockout here.
And that covers for a switch into something like the Ting Lu or the Glimmora that would be taking super effective damage from the Surging Strikes there. So really well played by Charel. Of course, benefiting from the fact that it was only a 4 strike on the scale shot there. Here comes Ting Lu. We've got 2 Treasures of Ruin on the field. You've got all the defenses lowered and all of the special attacks. So all kinds of auras going on. And these dark type Pokemon are certainly looking to get cheeky.
Yeah, Ting Lu, unfortunately for Simone, it puts Charel in a bit of a better situation, because Ting Lu only has access to Ruination and Sand Tomb, and that means that until Landorus is on 1 hit point, the Ting Lu actually can't do any damage or to. I'm going to start that.
Yeah, here we go, Ben. Let's reset.
It can't actually knock out the Landorus unless it's on 1 hit point. Ruination will always do at least 1 damage, but until it gets to 1 HP, it won't be able to do so. So it puts a lot of pressure on the Chen Pao to be able to knock out the Urshifu with a Sucker Punch, or make the choice to target down into the Landorus after it's just protected.
Right, and this is the problem. Ruination, I don't want to speak it into existence, but it can miss as well. That Sucker Punch going to fail with the freshly switched in Incineroar. Earth Power, huge damage onto the Chien Pao. That's not going to be around for too much longer. Fortunately, the Ruination does connect this time onto Landorus, so just halving whatever HP it had remaining, but chipping away and away. Ting-Lu in a decent position here, really. There's not too much that is threatening it, although, you know, you've got the Vessel of Ruin that's reducing the special attack output of the Landorus. Incineroar, freshly switched in, could be going for a fake out here. And yeah, I mean, Chien Pao isn't around for too much longer either, really. So really, Ting-Lu, you're going to want to deal with sooner rather than later.
I think the big thing for the going towards the later stages of this game is whether or not Charel can preserve that Choice Scarf Urshifu for a little bit later on, and sort of keep it in the back. Of course, there is the Rocky Helmet on this Ting-Lu, so you can't even just surging strikes into it really effectively. You've got to use that Choice Scarf to be able to get an Aqua Jet towards the Chen Pao to avoid the Sucker Punch. But if you're switching in, you're going to have to deal with a Sand Tomb coming out from that Ting-Lu, getting that KO. Sand Tomb, also not the most accurate of moves. We've seen that on stream. I think it was in the seniors finals, European International. They just kept missing over and over again. Not the move that you want to rely on every single time.
Right, there's attack stats dropped of Ting-Lu and Chien Pao here, and of course Simone down to the final 2 Pokemon, so cannot be resetting those drops at all. So it's slowly just whittling away at the damage output. Of course, that doesn't account for any critical hits that could be coming out from over on the other side of the field. Now, of course, this Incineroar does have Will-O-Wisp, in the face of 2 physical attackers over on Simone's side of the field. We also have a sneak peek as to the Pokemon that's in the back for Charel here, and this is why you're going to want to take care of the Ting-Lu sooner rather than later, because it will be the Raging Bolt. We haven't had a Terrestrialization come out yet in this game that could really turn the tides, but a wise protect there from Chien Pao.
I think so, yeah. Make sure that Chen Pao survives a little bit longer. Will-O-Wisp decreasing the physical damage of this Ting-Lu, but something I'm not quite clear about is whether Sand Tomb is a physical move or a...
It's a physical move. It's a physical move, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So that's going to drop the damage. But then this Incineroar can't now switch out because of the Sand Tomb trapping without using Parting Shot. But also, look at that. The residual damage from Sand Tomb doing even more than the initial hit.
Yeah, exactly. It's that Sand Tomb residual damage really racks up.
It really does. And in this sort of slower paced game, if the Sand Tomb can stay onto the field, onto both the Incineroar and the Raging Bolt that we know is in the back, maybe that residual damage is going to stack up quicker than the poison damage.
Well, Sacred Sword is going to be enough to deal with the Incineroar anyway. No need to let those Sand Tomb turns chip away at it. Leaving this Landorus on its lonesome for this turn at least. Sludge Bomb just to deal with the Chien Pao, and now it's Ting-Lu against the world. It's got its Vessel, offering it over to Charel's side of the field. Is Charel going to be filling it up for it or not? Well, Ruination connecting down onto Landorus. Again, just chipping away, halving the remaining health, and so is that burn. There's no way this Ting-Lu can heal either. Here comes the Raging Bolt, but very fortunately for Charel, still has the option to Terrestrialize. And the Ting-Lu burned a couple of Intimidate drops as well. Potentially the Raging Bolt will be okay, even without the Terrestrialization, but you'll probably want to set up at least one Calm Mind, given that the Vessel of Ruin is lowering all special attacks on the field.
I think, you know, at this stage, it's the Landorus that really does make the difference in this particular matchup. The fact that Simone is going to have to try to use Ruination turn after turn after turn. I was just trying to do the calculations in my head. I think it's 4 or 5 Ruinations to maybe even more than that.
It might be 4. I think it's 4. Yeah.
Yeah, 18.
Because the Landorus is on 18 right now.
Yeah,
so
18 goes to 9, goes to 5, goes to 3 or 2.
But the battle is forfeited anyway, because recognizing that the Ting-Lu cannot do much against the Raging Bolt there, really, even then.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so difficult. I think a lot of Ting-Lus that we've seen in a lot of different teams where it's become a little bit more popular in Regulation Set F, they're running more offensive options. Maybe they're running Ruination as well, but they've also got Heavy Slam to deal with Pokemon like Fluttermane. They've got moves like Stomping Tantrum just to do that little bit more damage rather than just go for the trap. But in this particular composition, Simone wanting to trap their opponent in with Sand Tomb, put them to sleep with the Dondozo using Yawn, and then capitalize on that extra space that you get by having your opponent's Pokemon being put to sleep. So, yeah, really, I like the set, but it didn't work out so much in this matchup. And, Charel, I think, took really good advantage of that, just targeting the Pokemon that he needed to target at the right times.
Right, for sure. And I think also when, for Simone, you're dealing with, Dragonite was out on the field immediately. And the main damaging move Simone was going for really in that battle was Scale Shot. And when you're dealing with a move that can hit 4 or 5 times, that makes a huge difference. That means it's sometimes falling short of knockouts that a straight up one-hit move could secure. And so it's holding the loaded dice, but it's a dice that maybe Simone doesn't want to depend on rolling, especially because being down 1 game has to win 2 more to try and secure this Swiss round 3 for Simone. So perhaps going for a different lead here. Engaging Fire, great to get set up with those howls, but when you're facing down a Landorus, it's really, really vulnerable. And again, it's not necessarily the immediate damage output that you want. Simone's team isn't one that relies on immediate damage output, but you do have the option of the Chi and Power. You have the Dragonite that can go for other moves that aren't the Scale Shot necessarily, and then, or you can slow things way down. I think basically the way Simone was playing that battle was that it was sort of in the middle. It wasn't quite slow enough or quite fast enough to try and disrupt Charel.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You do have to commit to your strategies there. Maybe a Glimora in the back could have swung the tide. Maybe you don't target down the Urshifu quite as quickly. Instead, you drop the Landorus and decide to use the Glimora instead. But let's get into this second game. Let's see what adaptations they've made. And well, Charlie, you were talking about commitment. Here is commitment to slowing down the game. Ting-Lu coming out into the 4, but paired with the Dondozo, it's Oblivious, stopping any attack drops from Incineroar. Now, Parting Shot will go through Oblivious, will be able to drop Dondozo's attack, but at least it's free from a turn from that Intimidate. And that means that Wave Crash here could actually be the move of choice. Sometimes, you want to slow things down, but then you look at the lead, it's like, hey, there's 2 Pokemon that are weak to water-type damage, and that's the sort of time where you start thinking, hey, maybe I should be going for a bit more of an offensive play.
Dondozo has a massive tongue, doesn't it? I've sort of only just realised. It's absolutely insane. It's not going to go out this turn anyway. Going to be flinched by the Incineroar, or at least faked out by the Incineroar. There's the substitute going up from the Landorus. Ruination going to go through that. Halve the damage output. I'm not sure I've seen the interaction between Ruination and the substitute, but yes, it's going to make, I didn't know if it would make the substitute's health halve. So then you'd have to go for another move to try. But no, the Dondozo is going to be flinching there, and a little bit of recovery to heal up most of what the fake out did to it.
I like what Charles trying to go for here, getting the Landorus feeling a little bit safer there, but Ruination, doing the damage to the whole health bar. And the substitute taking the brunt of that. Eventually, Landorus's substitute will be able to take a Ruination, but that's only when it's at a lower stage of its HP range. And now there's no fake out in play for Charel. You really got to be thinking about the damage output that the Dondozo and the Ting-Lu can be doing combined. Only 1 Intimidate on the Dondozo means that Incineroar maybe could be targeted down.
Well, it's Oblivious on the Dondozo.
Of course, only on the Ting-Lu.
Ting-Lu, right.
That the Intimidate was going on. So, you've got ground type coverage, you've got water type coverage. Maybe that Incineroar's feeling a little bit exposed at the moment.
Certainly is, Ben. It's time to Incineroar to get even scarier than it once was, going for that Terra Ghost. Of course, what on earth is that, Ben? You're just trying to freak us out with some spooky noises. The thing is, it wasn't quite spooky enough. If anything, I'm scared because I don't know what was going on rather than by the noise itself. But the Will-O-Wisp is going to connect down into the Dondozo, and it's going to be so effective that the Dondozo is just going to stop dead in its tracks as we go to our over-the-shoulder view. So that is certainly one way of lowering the attack stat of the Dondozo. Going for the burn. The Landorus protected by whatever the Ting-Lu was going for there, and the Ruination into the Landorus there, and a Yawn being able to be fired off from that massive mouth of the Dondozo into the Incineroar. So perhaps wanting to force a switch out there so that Incineroar doesn't fall asleep.
And Yeah, I like the idea of going for the yawn onto the Incineroar, because the likelihood is that the Incineroar is going to be going for a parting shot, getting on out of there, switching up the board state, and getting another Pokemon in for Charel. But instead, sticking in and going for the Will-O-Wisp gives the opportunity for the parting shot this turn to deal with the potential of yawn, or the going to sleep effect of the yawn. It's going to be, though, a hard switch out from Incineroar into the Raging Bolt.
And Lander is able to set up yet another substitute. Let's hope this one can stick around for a bit longer. Sandtomb into the Landorus, so predicting a switch there, because being a part flying type, Landorus will be protected. Yawn seems to be going into the Landorus there as well, so a much freer substitute there for Charel than it was in the previous turn. Now, you'll have noticed that the health bars over on Simone's side of the field are still very, very good, given that we're a few turns into the game. Charel just getting set up in order to be in the best possible position to start, deal out damage, and have his Pokemon on the field for as long as they possibly can be, especially with that substitute. Raging Bolt looking a little bit threatened because the Tinglu this time is not burned, so it would be taking super effective ground-type moves, especially because the Terra has been spent on the Incineroar. So the Raging Bolt is going to want to, try and get done what it can against the Tinglu before it goes down itself.
I like this targeting from Charel, going for the Tinglu, trying to knock that out first, get the Vessel of Ruin ability off the field, and then you can sort of focus down into the Dondozo, especially since the Dondozo's burnt. It's much, much less of a threat right now. But what is a threat is that Ruination coming out from the Tinglu. Tinglu most notably going before the Dondozo.
Yeah.
These are two very, very slow Pokemon.
Yeah.
But the order of operation is very, very much important here. Breaking the substitute, giving the Dondozo way to be able to attack into that Landorus, but instead choosing to get the yawn off onto the Raging Bolt, not let those Calm Mind boosts that it's getting up go a little bit too far.
Right, and Tinglu, of course, here isn't actually running a move like Stomping Tantrum. The only ground-type move is Sandtomb. This is why Ruination, even when you're burned, is so good. Ruination being a special attack, but either way, it just halves the HP bar of the opposing Pokemon. So Raging Bolt is actually safer in front of this Tinglu than it might be in front of other builds. It's got a Calm Mind up, and of course, Vessel of Ruin, lowering the special attack of everything on the field, so it's going to want to boost those stats as much as it can, but then, of course, being yawned is just going to be falling asleep, and then you're prey to exactly the kind of playstyle Simone likes with this particular team. Very slow and steady. Your opponent's sort of paralyzed without actually having the status condition of para, unable to really retaliate.
And the Intimidate coming in from that Incineroar on the switch in, so Charel choosing not to go to sleep with the Raging Bolt and sort of stick on in there, instead taking the Sandtomb with the Incineroar, getting another Earth Power onto the Tinglu and making sure that it's dropping its health down even further. But there's the Wave Crash, the effect of the burn going so well here for Charel. Landorus hanging on from half with just 6 hit points remaining, and it's really impressive for that Landorus, I've got to say. A Wave Crash is not a move that's just shy of doing damage, and so, yeah, seeing it hang on there and get another opportunity to launch an attack into the Tinglu could be pretty impactful.
Interesting that the Incineroar here, I'd say that normally the move that you drop in favor of Will-O-Wisp would be the knockoff, but in fact it's the Flare Blitz for the Incineroar over on Charel's side of the field, which is actually quite good in this matchup because you're not going to want to Flare Blitz into a Dondozo. Will-O-Wisp is so crucial for this particular matchup into Simone, because you can see the effect that it's having. That Dondozo is really, it's very threatening on the field for throwing out those yawns, but the damage output is lacking, and fundamentally Pokemon is a game about taking knockouts. I also want to give a quick shout out to the fact that in some camera angles you can see that there's still an item remaining to be picked up on top of the roof of Nemona's house here, so keep your eye out for that little Easter egg item as Tinglu is going to connect the Ruination into the Urshifu.
Ruination does so much damage at the start of a game where Pokemon haven't taken that much damage. It's doing half of a health bar there. Landorus protecting itself, of course, from the Wave Crash, and this Dondozo recovering the health that it loses to burn just now, so just keeping itself at the same hit points to what it was previously. But again, it's... Yeah, you feel in this situation like Charel's got a lot of offensive capability that he's put onto the field. He's attacked and attacked and attacked, but it's Simone that's really done more damage overall.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
the
yeah.
Landorus is sitting at pretty low HP. There's a little bit of chip on the Incineroar. The Urshifu is at 50%. And Simone still has 2 Pokemon yet unrevealed, and we know that that's the more quick-paced, more damage-dealing part of his team. And so this is one of the strengths of Dondozo and Ting-Lu, where they're trying to just whittle down the opponent and trying to do that little bit of damage, a little bit of damage, a little bit of damage, pave the way, clear the way for those Pokemon in the back, especially, you know, using every tool at their disposal, just like that Rocky helmet onto the Ting-Lu.
Yeah. Such a nice item choice there. Wondering where the Rocky helmet would go on the Ting-Lu, given its head is essentially a big bowl, but still somehow able to activate there. Sludge Bomb connecting down into the Dondozo. Dondozo not so known for its special defense, so dealing a good chunk of damage. Possibly the most excessive wave crash I've ever seen, dealing with those 6 HP on the Landorus there, and a tiny bit of recall, but a little bit of burn as well. And it's the first time, oh, well, no, because of the leftovers, we're not even going to see Dondozo's health bar go into the orange, but it's going to happen at some point, we hope, trainers, at some point in this matchup.
Yeah, keep things nice and even with a Pokemon knockout apiece here, and the Ting-Lu getting knocked out. It's done what it needed to do. It's taken away a lot of the damage that the Landorus has been able to put onto the field, but now the Landorus is gone, and at the same time the Ting-Lu is gone, so almost the timing of Simone here is really, really impactful. As the Dragonite comes out, we know the Urshifu locked into Surging Strikes is not going to be very effective against Dragonite nor Dondozo, and that gives the Dragonite a lot of room to maneuver here, get those scale shots going, get the speed boost, maybe make itself faster than the Urshifu in the end game if Charel decides to switch it out because it's not doing a lot. Maybe you need to swap to using Ice Spinner or Close Combat, but by the time it comes back in, if that Dragonite has got its scale shots going and is faster, it's going to be able to do the required couple of hit point damage to be able to knock it out.
Yeah, and if it is that gouging fire lurking in the bag, you could switch that in and start howling to get that Dragonite going even further. Extreme Speed attempting to pick off the Urshifu, but a switch into Raging Bolt as Will-O-Wisp is going to connect on the Dragonite, feeling a little bit too toasty for comfort there with its attack stat nice and lowered for Simone. Now there's Yawn coming out into the Incineroar. Time for a little catnap in a turn for this Incineroar. Leftovers activating on the Raging Bolt to try and keep it as healthy as it possibly can. And this is exactly what we were talking about, Ben. This is the much slower mode of play that Charel seems to be struggling a little bit more with.
But at the same time, you've got the Dragonite burnt now, and we saw the effect of that in game 1. Even after the couple of howls, the Dragonite really wasn't able to do that much damage. This Raging Bolt is threatening right now with a Dragon Pulse, and of course, looking at the Dondozo's moves, Wave Crash and Heavy Slam are both going to be resisted by Raging Bolt. So while Charel was looking like they were struggling a little bit in the early game, it will depend on what the last Pokemon is for Simone, but I think they've turned it around. I think knocking out the Ting-Lu opens up the door for Raging Bolt to do a little bit more. The Yawn is going to put a lot of pressure on and stop Charel from going for Calm Mind quite as easily, but it is supported by the Will-O-Wisp, but I think that's really what Charel's done so well to maneuver himself into a position where, yeah, okay, you're not doing that much damage, but you're not taking that much damage either.
Sure, you're not, and I guess Simone just making it more difficult than it was in game 1, so it's really cool to see that switch up. Here comes Urshifu back into the fray. Dragonite just keeping itself safe this turn with Protecticles, holding the loaded dice rather than the Assault Vest or the Choice Band, so it's able to do that. Parting Shot hopefully going into the Dragonite there, but protected. So, of course, its stats are going to remain the same. That's Yawn coming down into the Urshifu, and this sleepy bear is going to be feeling the effects of that if it doesn't switch out soon, as Dondozo has its health bar nice and stable thanks to the leftovers as well as the burn.
But is that Incineroar going to be taking that this turn? I'm pretty sure did it take a Yawn on the switch in?
Something did. I think, it did. Of course, going for his catnap, yeah.
Yeah, so many stages conditions. It's Yawn just turns out to be the last one.
Yeah.
That we were waiting for there, and that's actually, again, it's going to make a pretty big difference, a kind of swing to the output of Charel's team here. If the Incineroar went for a parting shot into the Dondozo that turn instead, we'd be looking at a much different end game here. But because the Yawn has gone off into the Urshifu, there's only so much switching that can be done. But there
Yes,
we go.
there
Now
we go.
This time, it's just an Ice Spinner getting a clean KO on that Dragonite.
Yeah, Extreme Speed could have maybe picked off the Urshifu, but with the Burn could have been close. Wave Crash doing minimal damage into the Raging Bolt there. And now Simone down to the final 2 Pokemon. Charel has, I believe, 3 remaining. The Urshifu, though, on very low health indeed. Raging Bolt doing its best on Dozo impression with the leftovers there too. So the question is Simone going to have enough offense left in the tank to deal with what Charel has?
It all comes down to the last Pokemon and how they can be positioned, because going for the Ice Spinner, yeah, you get the knockout on the Dragonite, but you go to sleep at the end of the turn. So there's a lot of a mind game there as to whether or not that's going to be most effective to do. Now you've got to wait for the Urshifu to wake up. You've got to wait for the Incineroar to wake up. Neither of them have taken their required 1 tick of sleep yet, and so that gives Simone a lot of space to work with here. A Raging Bolt can go for an offensive move. It can start trying to deal with the Gem Power, but it's going to take super effective damage in response. And I'm just thinking back through the game, we've had quite a lot of turns going on, but I think, oh yes, it was the Ghost Terror.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So the Raging Bolt cannot now Terror away from the super effective, is it Ice Spin?
Yeah, it's going to be the Ice Cold Crash, actually, which is a move that can miss, but we'll have to see if this Gem Power is feeling accurate today. Charel bringing the timer right down to the wire, and this is a game that could go to time, actually, so that's something else for these trainers to bear in mind. As Incineroar will come back in, it's dropping down and Intimidate onto these 2 attackers, onto the Gem Power, at least on those, of course, with the Oblivious ability. Even though it's asleep, it can still do that. You know, scary animals are still scary when they're sleeping, it's true. Now it's finally time for the Terror to come out from Simone's side. It's going to be the Gem Power, time to go faster, and this one is the Stellar Terror type, so it's going to be boosting for 1 turn only each individual type of move that it has. That means 1 boosted Ice Cold Crash. That's coming out here. No Protect from the Raging Bolt, and it's going to connect, and it's going to be enough for the knockout with that Sword of Ruin, dropping the defenses of everything around it. Simone has suddenly flipped the switch and has the foot firmly on the accelerator, having been so slow and steady up to this point in the game. Wave Crash just chipping away at the Incineroar. This Gem Power is really coming in clutch for Simone now.
And no ability for the Incineroar now to switch out Charel down to their last 2 Pokemon. And so that Gem Power, I think, is going to be really quite grateful for that. It's going to be able to go for a Sucker Punch. It's going to be able to go for, which will be super effective now on the Incineroar with its Ghost Terror.
Yeah.
It's going to be able to go for a Sacred Sword to knock out the Shifu, which hasn't yet burnt its 1 turn of mandatory sleep. And so, yeah, it's sort of one thing after the other. After such a slow game, such a steady game, all of the sort of dominoes fall one after the other. When you get those critical knockouts, everything sort of falls apart in this sort of balanced defensive game. And here we are. Another knockout straight away.
Yeah, it's got to feel good for Simone going for the Sacred Sword there, getting the 1-time Terra Stellar boost, because of course it's not going to do anything into the Incineroar being now that Ghost type. So what its Gem Power has remaining is very good for Simone. It is that Sucker Punch, which is going to have still that 1-time Dark boost thanks to the Terra Stellar. So Simone showcasing very well how to play the Terra Stellar, the new mechanic that we have access to thanks to the Indigo Disc DLC. And now you can just whittle away at the health bars over on Charel's side of the field. Incineroar taking the non-boosted by the Terra Stellar anymore. Ice Cold Crash. Citrus Berry, you do have to get through that, and so it's going to be around on the field even with another turn of sleep for a bit longer, because Dondozo will not have the damage output to knock it out this turn. Saving a crit. Is it going to be a crit here? No, it's not.
Not even a crit may have been able to knock out that Incineroar, but I really like the way that Simone is going about this end game. Not going for the Sucker Punch, knowing that Will-O-Wisp and Parting Shot are some of the moves of choice. Certainly Will-O-Wisp would be very effective for this Incineroar, should it have been, instead of taking a nap, actually keeping itself awake and able to move. And I think this really does showcase this game what the effect of Pokemon being asleep are, and the choice that you have to make every time that Yawn is coming out. Do you switch out, or do you take that knockout? I mean, the Ice Spinner was great. Dragonite gets knocked out, but if you think back to the situation, it was burnt. So maybe it's not the best Pokemon to be knocking out on that turn. Maybe you do have to keep switching things up in order to make sure that your Pokemon are still awake, they're still able to attack. Give your opponent a few more things to think about.
Right, so this is really interesting heading into Game 3, because Game 1 seemed to be more the pace of game that Charel preferred. Game 2 certainly more that Simone preferred. So heading into Game 3, what do you do if you're Simone? Do you just go all in with fast and hard, try and catch Charel off guard, excuse me? Or, we've got a lot of setup moves on the field here as well. Do you try and get one of your Pokemon nice and ready to go, deal out massive damage, and try and catch your opponent off guard that way? I think there are so many options. This is the team competition that Simone in particular is running means that it's very hard for Charel to cover for every single mode of play that Simone could throw out. So really fascinating to see how these players will approach game 3.
One common thread that I'm sort of seeing is the potential for Ogerpon Half Flame to
right,
make or break the matchup. If he goes for a Sword Stance, if it's just going for Ivy Cudgels and even Grassy Glides, it doesn't even need the Rillaboom to support it here. I don't think it can just go on the offensive after a Sword Stance with those moves. It's super effective with the Tinglu, and if the Tinglu goes for its Terra Poison, then you can start Ivy Cudgeling. And I think what Charel needs to be thinking about is how do you break down the Dondozo Tinglu a little bit quicker.
Yeah, that is ultimately what threw a bit of a spanner in the works for Charel, and burning them is a fantastic option. Also, the fact that the Tinglu doesn't have a very heavy hitting ground type move, that's something that Charel can leverage to their advantage. Of course, as you were saying earlier, Ben, you try and trap in with Santum as well as Yawn so that the Pokemon are forced to fall asleep. But as long as Charel is able to pivot around, then maybe that's not going to be able to happen. It's a different lead once more coming out from Simone in game 3. Gouging Fire as well as Dondozo. There's Incineroar and Urshifu coming out for Charel.
Now this looks like a little bit more of an offensive mode there for Simone, rather than just leaning into the Dondozo Tinglu straight away again, instead opting to boost up the damage of the Dondozo, not leave it on the field for turn after turn after turn being burnt and doing a pretty low damage overall with its options of Wave Crash and Heavy Slam. Instead, kind of doing what the Dragonite was trying to do in game 1, where it was howling it up. Maybe it got burnt, but it's okay. You can just keep on howling it up, get past the point where burnt is reducing your attack to, and then start doing sort of positive amounts of damage. Looking at Charel's side, there is no Landorus this time, and I think the Gouging Fire is going to be really happy to see that, because it's tough to be able to take out in this situation. There we go, Fake Out, and the Howl's getting going.
Howl on the Gouging Fire. Dondozo, I'd fear a Howl coming out from that massive bowels of the Dondozo there. Surging Strike's good for a little bit of chip going down into the Gouging Fire. But, you know, that's already nearly half health dealt to the Gouging Fire there. Dondozo, of course, flinching thanks to the Fake Out that came out with a bit of leftover recovery as well. Wouldn't be surprised if we see this Dondozo stick around with a green health bar for a little while.
So it depends on how much recoil it's going to be taking from the Wave Crashes, because if another Howl comes out from the Gouging Fire, boosting itself up to 2 stages of increased attack, maybe it could knock out the Incineroar, even if the Incineroar goes for its Terra Ghost that we saw in the last game. I wouldn't put a lot on it, but it's definitely a possibility. We're getting to that stage of increased attack where that's something that these trainers are going to have to consider.
Another thing that Charel has to consider is that Urshifu with Surging Strikes locked into that now. Surging Strikes always crits, which is kind of another way of saying it never crits. It never does any more damage than you're expecting. So if that, you know, the Gouging Fire brought down to just above half health, it's probably going to survive if it's just the Surging Strikes going in there. Yet another Howl coming out from Gouging Fire. I think getting noisy on the field. There's Surging Strikes. That's one hit. Here comes the second hit. The third hit is not going to be enough. Depends if this Incineroar has targeted down into the Gouging Fire or not to try and secure the knockout there. Will-O-Wisp is going to try and connect on the Dondozo. That's going to be a miss, though. Wave Crash now. It's no longer super effective. The Incineroar still down to just a fifth of its health, thanks to a couple of Howl boosts and 0 Intimidate on the Dondozo.
That Gouging Fire is now at 1 stage of increased attack. And I'm wondering if it's getting to the stage where, well, certainly a Heat Crash now that the Incineroar no longer resists it, but also Ground Swipe is going to be doing a good chunk of damage as well. And that's definitely something that you've got to be considering if you're Charel, because your Urshifu has done pretty good work so far. It's not been able to pick up the Gouging Fire, though, but the Gouging Fire, being faster than the Choice Scarf Urshifu, is easily going to be able to knock out this Incineroar.
Chills and thrills brought by the Terra Ghost Incineroar there that cooled down just enough for the Heat Crash to be able to secure the knockout rather than being a resisted hit. But that is Gouging Fire down as well. But crucially, this Dondozo is not burned, and it was burned in the second game that we witnessed just now. That could really turn the tables in Simone's favor. You can see how much the Wave Crash did into Urshifu there with 2 Howl boosts. It's on just above half of its health, even though it was a resisted hit. And look at the Pokemon Charel has in the back. This Dondozo is fast becoming the whale to deal with.
Yeah, this is... The Dondozo's having a whale of a time.
There we go.
Yeah. I'm just gonna.
No, it was great. I loved it. I loved it. And Ogerpon's looking a little bit grumpy at the pun you just made, but hey, look, we all enjoyed it here.
Put your mask on, Ogerpon, and enjoy the puns coming out this weekend. And yeah, certainly the Dondozo is going to be the Pokemon to beat now. Tinglu coming in for Simone, maybe trying to now cover the weakness that Dondozo has to special-based moves. Certainly the Landorus that could have come in, that we know is in the back for Charel, would have done maybe a little bit more overall, but the Ting-Lu's just protecting it and just making sure that it can wave crash after wave crash after wave crash.
Ting-Lu is going to be the terror option of choice right now for Simone. Is going to have that skull and crossbones on its head. All aboard the good ship Ting-Lu. And here comes Surging Strikes, no longer super effective into the Ting-Lu. But thanks to the Rocky Helmet chip, it's going to deal a significant amount back to the Earthshoe. I think we're just in the range where the Rocky Helmet is doing slightly more than Surging Strikes, perhaps, or around the same. So Ting-Lu down to about a quarter, the Earthshoe on such low health now, and this Dondozo seems to have free reign, really. Ivy Cudgel Fire type coming down into the Dondozo, going for the critical hit there, and it looks like it got it. So at least the Dondozo has had its health bar removed a little bit. Santoon is enough to pick up the knockout there.
Okay.
Not 100% accurate, but it did find its mark right then.
And the wave crash going to be the last turn for this Dondozo, launching out into the Ogerpon. It's a one-hit knockout here. Going to be doing all of the HP damage and taking that all in recoil as well. Of course, worth mentioning that the Dondozo was a Terra Grass, so the Ivy Cudgel trying to target down at the potential of Dondozo going for its Terra to make itself take less damage from a grass type attack, but instead Ting-Lu makes itself a little bit weaker to those earth powers, but you can't Earth power into a Ting-Lu when that Dondozo is sitting there looking so threatening.
Oh, Dondozo hangs on as well. So disappointing for Charel. Landorus does dodge though. What was the move coming out from the Ting-Lu? The Sand Tomb? No, it would have been the Sand Tomb. Yeah, Ruination. That is a super effective double boosted wave crash coming out from Dondozo. And yes, the whale doesn't fail.
Whale not failing at all. Simone taking the win in a really tight set.
Yeah.
And we've got to call it out. We've got to address the elephant in the room, the whale in the room, so to speak. That Will-O-Wisp on turn 2, turn 3, going into the Dondozo. The Incineroar, I didn't catch it beforehand, but the Incineroar being faster than the Dondozo. Yeah, okay, the howls go off, but you can neuter that damage before it even comes out onto the field, unlike Dragonite, which was, one of the sort of speedier Pokemon that were taking benefit from the howl. Instead, the Will-O-Wisp coming out and not connecting meant that the Incineroar took more damage than it needed to. That might have put it in a place, if the burn went off, where the Heat Crash from Gouging Fire would have maybe needed to know how to be able to knock it out. It just changes up every decision that these trainers have to make. The Incineroar's a little bit more, the Dondozo's doing a lot less damage for the rest of the game, and it's taking a little bit of HP loss each turn as well, makes it easier to knock out rather than kind of recovering its health back with leftovers. And so, did make a big impact. But these things happen, and you've got to take advantage of it, and that's what Simone did in this match.
Oh, absolutely. Will-O-Wisp is a move that isn't 100% accurate. That just happens sometimes. That 3-game set really showcased 3 different tempos of playing. Game 1 was that more medium, trying to do like for like. Game 2 was certainly the slowest that we saw. And then Game 3, turning up the momentum over on Simone's side and going to show how that can affect the mental state of the opponent as well. Trying to budget for it. If you're able to outpace your opponent and catch them off guard, then suddenly you've got that surprise element in your favor as well. So really nice showcase of all of the mental factors at play in this game.
Yeah, so that's the thing when you're playing these kind of more slow balanced teams like Dondozo, Ting-Lu, you've got to be aware of all of the different ways that you can run it, all of the different options that you have coming into a game, because as you said, Charlie, and it's such a great point when you're looking at this team. It's so difficult to know how to lead against it, but also quite difficult when you're playing it to know which lead to go to. How does your opponent react to each potential scenario that can come out? And I think Simone called that really well in all 3 games, actually. Even though Game 1 went to Charel, I think Simone still played that so well. It was only down to the sort of end game where it really kind of changed things up. And I just like the way that he really leveraged all of the synergy in that team and showed us in each of the 3 games what it can do.
Right, and I'm just thinking about that game 3, and Charel did have the Raging Bolt in the back, and that really needed to be on the field. Well, he didn't bring it to the game, but did have the option on the team. Really needs to come to the fray as soon as it possibly could have done it. Of course, it wasn't even present as an option, but in order to deal with the Dondozo, this is the thing: multiple leads that you can go with, but also the Dondozo. Is it just going to be a bulk on the field that's difficult to remove, or is it going to be an offensive threat as well? And it's very hard to budget for all kinds of playstyles that this team offers. But we've got to give credit to Charel as well, who was playing around so well in that game. The first game, of course, went in Charel's favour, did everything they possibly could against Simone, identifying that Will-O-Wisp was going to be crucial, but ultimately it did go Simone's way.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the Raging Bolt, but I want to expand on that slightly because there's so many ways that you can play a Raging Bolt. You can play it these sort of more offensive orientated ones. We've seen Life Orb, we've seen Booster Energy, we've seen even the Assault Vest ones can be fairly offensive in their moveset, but they can also play a little bit more defensively. But the one that's got really picked up in popularity that gives an overall really nice utility is this Calm Mind variant that Charel was running. Now, that's got some ups and downs. You've got the ability to boost yourself up. You've got the ability to do a little bit more damage. You've got more staying power because your defensive capability is increasing. But in this case, you can only thunderclap.
Yeah, exactly.
Dozo. And so then you're relying on Dragon Pulse because it's going to yawn first.
Yeah, yeah,
It's not going to go for those offensive moves under risk of a thunderclap, right? So, yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff to be gleaned from the way that each of these trainers have built their team and the individual choices that they've made. How that affects these sort of matchups where, hey, I really want to use an electric coverage into Dondozo, but tough luck, not going to really work too often.
Sure, there's so much to unpack from that matchup, as there is with all kinds of matchups. But for now, I think we're going to take a little bit of a break to decompress. We'll be back very shortly. Don't go anywhere. I'll still be merry. We know that Ben's still going to be cuckoo.
That's a great bit to end head in hand.
I did not expect that sound. Like a little tad roasting all the way. Like a dab. Is that like your dance and just press?
Maybe it is. Oh yeah, you called me cuckoo. I'm going to try and lean into it.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, no, it worked. I climb right. Like, at this point, like, like, well, things. Up your reach.
Okay.
Just gonna try and sort of. Oh. You can guarantee. You have some.
No, it's not that I was trying to unplug everything. I was just trying to see where this is the only thing that's connected.
That is that's big man.
Okay, so this is not the 40.
That is big one. Yeah, this one.
Right, hang on a second. Before you move, I'm just going to move this.
This arm, so that is going to see him. Sort it out. Hey, can I get somewhere else?
You're clear. You can move.
This as well.
It's really nice. That one goes in the. I'm gonna take this one.